Okay, so we have only one more session. It's about living the Orthodox life. And how do we acquire the Orthodox life? Orthodoxy, contemporary life, contemporary issues. I almost feel like we ought to just forget about it and just have questions, because I think there's more questions. But I'll just give you some things to think about. I think I've already given you some ideas of how we apply our Orthodox mind, and it seems to be that people are still not quite understanding. People are not understanding what I mean by not using human reasoning. God gave us human reasoning. We're supposed to use it, but not to create new doctrines or to change the teachings of the church. I hope that's abundantly clear, because for some reason people are getting this idea that maybe I'm saying we should be irrational or there's no room for human reasoning. The fathers of the church and the prayers of the church, they call us the reason-endowed sheep of Christ. This is what makes us different from animals. We're supposed to use our human reasoning, but not to create excuses for why we don't do this or that when we're supposed to, or to come up with new doctrines. This is what we're saying. This is what I mean by that. This is how human reasoning has been misused in the West, to distort the doctrines of the church and come up with new ones. So, how do we develop an Orthodox phronema, and how do we move from this mind of the world to have the mind of Christ? And knowing that our purpose in this world is sanctification. And why is this necessary? Because without that, we cannot be saved. If we are thinking purely in terms of meeting requirements, then we cannot be saved. We're talking about relationship with God. Everybody understands that. Everybody understands that we're supposed to have a relationship with Jesus Christ. The Protestants are great at that, relationship with Jesus. I think that sometimes the Orthodox forget that. So when I say that I'm not being critical of everybody, they all have something we can learn from. I think it's a beautiful thing that Protestants talk so often about Jesus Christ, and they want to share their faith. That's a beautiful thing. We shouldn't be embarrassed to do that. We shouldn't feel obligated to preach, but at the same time, we should feel comfortable about talking about Christ. There's a funny cartoon that shows two men at a bus stop, and one man, he's sitting at the bus stop, and he's got this big T-shirt with something written on it, and on his T-shirt it says, "Ask me about Jesus," in big letters. And so he's saying to the other guy, "This gets me a seat on the bus by myself every time." So, we understand that people don't want to be preached to. But again, there's something beautiful, there's something refreshing about the fact that Protestants feel a desire to spread the word about Christ. This is something we should all have. So how we do this, however, might be a little bit less what we would consider aggressive. But it's important, because we shouldn't be ashamed of Christ. We shouldn't be ashamed to do our cross in a restaurant over our food before we eat, or on the plane before we take off. We should be praying constantly. We should be sanctifying our space in our lives. This is how we apply these things in the church. So first, we must remember that we are engaged in spiritual warfare. You are enlisted as a soldier of Christ. You can't opt out. Once you're baptized and you've put on Christ, you've put on your baptismal robes, you now belong to Christ, and you have a bullseye on your back. The devil is going to be after you. He's going to try to destroy you. And if you're like you people who spend your Saturday listening to an old lady in a green dress, he's going to have other ways to try to bring you down. What I'm trying to say is this. Sometimes when we get involved in the church, we don't realize how the devil is working against us by using what's happening in our lives against us. We have to be aware of this. The devil will take the good things that we do and try to turn them against us. If he can't tempt you with normal things, like, I don't know, pornography or gambling or some of these obvious sins, like convince you to have an affair or something like this, if he can't do it that way, he's going to use the church. So he's going to have something happen at the church and get you upset about something. Somebody didn't treat you well, or they forgot to thank you, or something happened, so you get all hot and bothered and all huffy. That's the evil one at work. And he's just yanking your chain and you're jumping to his tune. That happens. Or you start reading the Bible, and you're reading the Bible a lot, and it feels so good, and you start to say, yeah, I really get this, I really understand this. And Father gives a sermon, and you say, that's not right. Father doesn't know what he's talking about. Or you read the canons of the church, and you try to correct the priest, the bishop. This is not according to the canons. You think that you're appointed to be the Orthodox police, what should be done, how things should be done. This is the devil. So he's using the good things that we're trying to do against us. So that we have to be constantly vigilant about this and not falling into his traps. So somebody earlier was asking me a question about, this happens a lot too. Let's say we're doing something good in the church, chanting or whatever. And so we become proud of that. And this is a temptation from the evil one. And it happens, you have a nice voice and say, boy, you have a wonderful voice. It's very easy for that to go to your head. So what we do, how do we fight that? We fight that. St. Paisios had the best response to this. He said, our thoughts, because we all get thoughts like this. There was a Seinfeld, you know the TV show Seinfeld? There was an episode like this where Jerry was trying to help this Pakistani guy who opened a restaurant, and he wasn't having any business. So he goes to, and he just tries to bring him business, and the Pakistani guy says, oh, you're a very good man, you're a very good man. And then Jerry's saying, yes, I am good, aren't I? That's how we think about ourselves, but we're not supposed to. We're not supposed to entertain those thoughts. So whether it's about pride or some other temptation, St. Paisios says, when you have the thought, don't let it land. It's like, thoughts are like airplanes. They're always going around in our head. So they're going to come. We can't stop them, but don't entertain it. Don't let the thought land. So don't say, yes, I am good, aren't I? Yes, it is good that I'm reading the book. You have to say, I am nothing. You have to say this. And again, in our culture where we emphasize self-esteem, it's kind of counterculture, but it's important. Because we can do many good things, but in the end, we might not be saved. So how is it that we are saved? We have to make efforts. We have to fight against temptation, and we also have to fight against these kind of hidden sins of pride, it's a very real thing, and a very real way that the evil one takes us down. And we have to exert a lot of effort. But we also have to remember that little things matter. Sometimes we think, oh, it's not a big deal. I didn't do this, or I should have done that. I didn't do it. Sometimes a little thing can mean a lot. Everything counts. Everything matters. We have to recognize that we're engaged in spiritual warfare, and we're part of this training system that's the church. So our coaches are the fathers of the church. Our cheerleaders are the saints. They're there in heaven. They're watching us. Our training regimen is the liturgical life of the church, the spiritual life of the church, the fasting. We're supposed to do this for a purpose. We don't do it just to do it. Oh, we do it because we're Orthodox. Why do we fast? Oh, we're Orthodox. That's just what we do. That's a terrible answer. It has a purpose in our life. And it can really transform us when we approach it with humility and with real desire and making a real effort. Now, I'm going to share with you a story that somebody told me that I thought was one of the most extraordinary stories. I hope I didn't tell you this. I just can't remember. I'm sorry. I talk so much. I was given a ride to the airport once. It was kind of far away from the city. It was like an hour away. The person who was wanted to give me the ride. He was raised in the church. He's Greek. So he was Greek American. So he was raised in the church. And so, he had continued to go to church his whole life. But he didn't have a very good attitude about church. I don't know why he was coming to church. Didn't really have a good attitude. And so he told me that he would be sitting in the pew at church, and the priest would be giving a sermon. And in his mind, he was thinking, you don't know what you're talking about. What are you bothering with us with this sort of a thing for? And he would be interacting with parishioners, and he was thinking, you're an idiot. You ought to know better than that. He didn't say these things. He was just thinking them. So he was thinking critical thoughts. Why are you doing that? You're so stupid. So these were thoughts that were in his head. So he didn't really have much use for the church. He would come to church, or maybe not active, but on the periphery. Everybody knew who he was. So the priest one year, preparing for Lent, said, let's follow what the church says for us to do during Lent. So he says, you know what, in his mind, I'm going to take you up on that. I'm going to do exactly what you say to do. Everything the church tells us to do for Lent, I'm going to do it. On Clean Monday, I'm going to start fasting. I'm going to go to every service of the church, the comp lines and the salutations. I'm going to go to all the service of the church. I'm going to read these spiritual books like the Lives of the Saints. I'm just going to do, and I'm going to see what happens, like an experiment. And he said he was completely transformed. By the end of Lent, he was a different person. Now, nobody necessarily knew it because all the evil thoughts were in his head. He wasn't antagonistic to people. But he was amazed at how much he was changed. And he was crying as he's telling me the story in the car. I thought, wow, but that wasn't even the best part, because I was so impressed by this story. First of all, I never thought about that. And I suppose that this is the grace of God at work, okay, in the life of this man. Because he gave God a chance. Okay, here I am. I'm going to do what the church says to do. And it actually had an impact on him. So here's the part that was the most surprising. He began to apologize to people for whom he had bad thoughts. They had no idea. He actually went up to the parish priest and said, Father, I want you to know that I used to think you were an idiot. I used to make fun of yours. I used to criticize your sermons in my head. And the priest is like, doesn't even know how to react to that. What? And then he started talking to people in the parish, telling them his secret thoughts and apologizing. This is like something a saint would do, honest to God, because he could say, well, I shouldn't have done that. I'm not going to let anybody know. But he's bearing his soul and apologizing. This is real confession. That's the original confession. Confess to everybody in the church. And it was just so extraordinary. But I'm telling you, there's such power in what the church offers us if only we would use it. If only we would do it. But we're lazy. We want things on our own terms. And so we make excuses. But my dear friends, we're engaged in spiritual warfare. You better get your weapons ready. You have to be prepared. And for those of you who are newly illumined or you're about to be illumined, don't be surprised if life becomes much more difficult after you're baptized or after you're chrismated, because the target on your back is getting bigger. The closer you get to Christ, the more the devil attacks you. If there's any doubt in your mind about this, read the life of St. Anthony by St. Athanasius. He was constantly being attacked. So the monks and the saints of the church, it's not like they never suffered attacks from the evil one. They did. They suffered a lot. So we have to expect resistance. We have to expect resistance from all corners of our lives. Something will happen at work, our family. This is how the devil operates. Now, we shouldn't say to our family, hey, that's the devil talking, through you. We don't say that. But we have to recognize that we are being challenged, and the source of the evil is not the person in front of us, but the evil one. This is very, very important so that we don't misplace our anger. The anger should not be directed to the person. This is what the saints of the church did. When the martyrs were being martyred, they weren't blaming the Romans. They were blaming the evil one. This is what they were doing. They felt sorry for the people who were killing them. They felt sorry for the Romans. And so this is the attitude that we need to have. We should also remember that life is temporary, that these things do not last long. I don't know if you remember, when you were a kid, what kind of problems did you have? Your problems seemed huge when you were a child. Of course, they were a child's problems. It's not that they weren't important to you at the time. It was. But in retrospect, the things that seemed so important when you were a child, you would say that's nothing today. The same thing in the next life. The things that we magnify, oh my gosh, if only I could, that's going to be nothing in the next life. So we have to keep this perspective. We must immerse ourselves in the life of Christ and the life of the church. Everything the church is offering us is for our salvation. So when we turn away from it, when we say, I don't really need that, or I don't really feel, we're missing the opportunity to improve our illumination. We were illuminated at baptism, but we need to keep that flame of Christ, alive in us. And it's not, and a lot of you are into reading because you're learning about the faith, and that's great. But we have to remember that we don't come to knowledge of God just by reading. That's just from the intellect. We have to come to knowledge of God through prayer. That's the Orthodox way. So, what kinds of things can we do to shape our Orthodox phronema? We participate in the life of the church. And this is how we grow in Christ. So, even in a monastery, people have relationships and they have, conflicts and things like this. This is where we work these things out. This is how we are sanctified, by having those experiences, which will surely come to us, and then conquering our bad impulses and doing the right thing. So this is what we do, especially right here in the life of the church. Now, you're not going to know everything there is to know. You're not going to all of a sudden be wise and learned and all this. Everything takes time. If you're newly illumined, if you're a new Orthodox Christian, don't be hard on yourself because you don't have it all together. If you think you have it all together, you're in trouble. But if you don't, if you know you don't, then you have to understand it's going to take a long time. I've spoken to a lot of converts that told me it took them 20 years before they were able to really think Orthodox naturally, because you're going to want to fall back into the old habits. Your mind is going to go to this kind of an answer or raise this kind of a question that really has nothing to do with orthodoxy. So just realize it's going to take time for you to be reshaped, to be reformed, to be thinking Orthodox. But the more you attend church and participate in the services of the church, it's really important. I like to chant. I like to sing. I've always sung in choirs. There is so much to be learned from the hymns of the church. So if you're in the choir, you should be thinking about what you're singing. If you're standing and you're letting the choir do the responses, it would be nice if you had the services of the church and you're following along, because this is what's reinforcing our manner of thought. So, for example, somebody said, it was one of my, he's been chrismated. One of my students was saying, he was a Protestant, so he was saying, about how, Jesus suffering for us. And we didn't talk about this, but one of the passages that is used by Protestants is Isaiah 53, the suffering servant, how he was wounded for our transgressions. He, was bruised for our transgressions, wounded for our sins. And this is what he said to me. That's what he quoted that. And I said, and what does it say after that? By his stripes we are healed. Not by his stripes, he paid the price that was demanded by God the Father. Sin is departure from God. Sin is spiritual wounding. We come to church, we receive healing. Chrysostom and all the fathers talked about the church as the hospital of souls. This is where we come to be healed. It's not where we come to check off a checklist. I did my whatever obligation for the day. It's not where we come to make sure that everybody else is behaving in an appropriately Orthodox manner, covering their head or not covering their head. allowing milk during the coffee hour or not. All of this, that's not what we're coming here for. We're coming for healing. And then everything the church offers us, including our interpersonal relationships, are opportunities for spiritual growth. So we come to church and participate in the life of the church. And gradually, you're going to grow. It's hard for us because when you're a full-grown adult and you've led a good life, you've led a competent life, you're a professional, you're an expert in so many things, for you to come to church and recognize you're an infant, it's kind of hard, but you have to remind yourself, I don't know anything. I say that for myself. I don't know anything. I'm not even sure if I'm in kindergarten yet, okay? But that's the truth. There is so much to learn. There is so much growth, but it happens gradually over time. Remember when you were a kid, you couldn't see yourself growing up. People would say to you, look how big you've gotten. And you're like, I don't know, I'm just the same. You don't pay any attention to that. You don't recognize it, but it's happening incrementally. This happens for us in the church. We're all infants in the church. And the longer you're in the church, the more you grow in maturity, in understanding, in your depth. And this is something that just takes time. Don't rush it. Try to enjoy the process. Accept the fact that you have much to learn. Don't be quick to teach others. Be very careful about that, lest you fall into the trap of, egoism. So come to church and just understand it's going to take time for you to mature in the church. And you're never going to reach it. You're never going to say, oh, now I've got this wonderful Orthodox phronema. We all have to battle it. We all are influenced by the culture around us. And so we all end up thinking, I'll tell you what happened. I crashed Father Costa's car. This is a story I haven't told. I don't think I told anybody in Australia. The first to hear that on Father Costa's name day, I did him a big favor and made sure he needed a new car. Okay? It was, I can't forget the date. It was May 21st of this year. I had been out with Father Costa in a neighboring city, and it was about 6:30, and choir practice was at 7 o'clock. So I said, honey, I'm going to be late if I take you home first and drop you off. Why don't you just come to church with me and sit in the church and pray for 2 hours? Because I didn't want to be late for practice. So he said, no, take me home. So because we were driving his car, it was an old 2005 Toyota Camry, really old car. But it was working fine, and he was going to ride that thing till it died. It was going to just bitter. It was already over 200,000 miles. So take him home, drop him off. I'm on my way to church, and a woman turns left right in front of me. I'm riding on the right, and she comes right in front of me, and it's like you see this and you just can't stop, and wham, I T-boned her, and so that's what happened. So I text the people at church. I said, I'm never going to get to choir practice tonight. I've been in this accident, and I've totaled Father Costa's car. Well, it really was her fault. There was a no left turn sign there. She really came out of nowhere, and I hit her. I couldn't avoid it, but she was the one who shouldn't have turned. So it wasn't my fault. But the point is, so now we have to find a car for Father Costa, and I started thinking about it. I have an old car, it's, again, about the same thing. It's about 20 years old. I said, gee, you know what? It would be nice to have a new car. So I started thinking about this. Now, do I need a new car? Not really. It's running fine, but I want another car. I want a new car. So these things come to us, right? Because we see these nice things. We think, gee, wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be nice to do this? Wouldn't it be nice to do that? And it's not that there's something inherently wrong with that, but what is feeding that? It's the consumer society that we have. I would like to be thinner. I would like to be more attractive. I confessed to somebody here when we were signing books that I dye my hair. And do you know why? I don't want to dye my hair. I said to my husband during COVID, how about if I just let my hair grow out and just let it go gray, because it's kind of... And he says, no. So I dye my hair because my husband, I said, why not? He said, I want to be married to a young chick. That's what he said. That's what he said. So don't blame me. This is not me. This is Father Costa. I want to be, those were his exact words. I want to be married to a young chick. Okay, so here I am. At a certain point, it's going to look ridiculous, especially if I have a lot of wrinkles. I'll look ridiculous. Anyhow, I don't know how I got on that subject. Our culture influences us to value things because it's being fed to us constantly through the television, to value beauty, to value possessions, to value status, all these things that are meaningless in the next life. So that's why we always have to be watching our phronema and asking ourselves, is this really appropriate for me as an Orthodox Christian? Is this appropriate? What is driving my desire to have this, to be like this, to think this way, etc.? So we have to watch out for that. So we have to think about developing our phronema. We should say our prayers every day. And then, it's difficult. Don't think you're alone if you start saying your prayers, Holy God, Holy Mighty and Lord, all Holy Trinity, have mercy on us. By the time I get to the Lord's Prayer, already my mind is wandering. Okay? I have to stop and think about it. I don't know why it is. I suppose right in there doesn't want me to say the Lord's Prayer. Our mind starts to wander. That's a discipline that we can cultivate to be more focused in prayer, but we have to try. We can't just let the thoughts fall. We can't just follow our thoughts randomly while our lips are saying something. We have to really work at it, but we can. We can improve if we care enough and if we try, but we have to want to try. My mother was amazing at that. Amazing. My sister and I would see her in church. She would stand on the right side, maybe like 5 or 6 pews down. She had her prayer book, and she would stand there. She never looked up. Never. She never looked up to see the entrance. If somebody came by, she never looked up. My sister and I would say the whole church could fall down around her. She'd be standing there like this. And we just marveled at her self-discipline, because it takes a lot of discipline not to look up and see who's coming by and who came in. And it takes a lot of discipline. And we would say, Mom, how can you be so focused in church? And she said, oh, it took me many years. So she tried. She knew she was undisciplined. She knew she needed to focus in prayer. But I'm telling you, she was amazing. I've never seen anybody like that. And I'm ashamed to say I haven't tried it. I haven't tried to exercise that. So, but it's something that we can accomplish if we really put effort behind it. So you want to look up and see, I wonder who's, don't look. You can do it, but we don't want to. Instead, we follow the impulse. So there are many things we can do to improve ourselves, to become stronger, to become better. But we have to work at it. It doesn't happen by itself. We should participate in the sacraments. Holy Communion, of course. Confession, my guess is that at this parish you're going to confession to your priest. If you were a Greek parish, I would guess most of you were not, I'm sorry to say. But a lot of the Greeks make excuses for why they don't need to go to confession. This is one of the most important things we can do. Not simply, we're not like the Catholics, where you go to, the confessional and you say, bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It's been since my last confession. I have done this and this and this and this. And then they give you a little penance and you go on your merry way. This is an opportunity for you to discuss your spiritual life with your priest and not to be ashamed. And he says in the prayer, you're not confessing to me, you're confessing to Christ. Christ is invisibly present with us. Confess to Christ. The priests have so much experience. There's so much they can help you with if you'd only let them. And don't be ashamed. I know that sometimes we feel like, oh, what will Father think of me? You know how many confessions they hear? They don't remember all these things, and they don't think less of you because you confess, because they know it takes a lot of courage. And there's something else. When you're confessing to the priest, he is thinking how unworthy he is to hear your confession. He's not thinking, boy, this person's a mess. It's a good thing they came to confession so I can straighten them out. He's praying about how he's going to help you. I want you to understand that. He's thinking about you with a great deal of sympathy and compassion and hoping that he can help you. He's not judging you. Our priests don't judge you. It's the truth. So, of course, you should read the scriptures every day a little bit. If you don't have time, and a lot of us live very hectic lives, there are all kinds of apps. There's Ancient Faith Radio has The Path. Let's say you're driving to work, and you can listen to The Path, which is the epistle and gospel reading of the day with patristic explanation. It's wonderful. In 20 minutes, you hear the epistle and the gospel. You get beautiful insights from the fathers. There's an app that the Greek, I don't know if you have apps here. You may have it. We have it at the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America. It has the readings of the day and the saints of the day. You're standing there in line for something to get a coffee or whatever. Read the epistle reading. Read the gospel reading. These are ways that we can incorporate these things into our daily lives. Cultivate virtue and do good works. Do we have to do good works to be saved? There's no answer to that question. That's not an Orthodox question. Are we supposed to do good works? Yes, but not so that we can do them in order to be saved. We're supposed to do good things because we're supposed to be imitating Christ. And by imitating them, we learn mercy, compassion, gentleness, generosity, faithfulness. If we're doing something just because we're supposed to, we're not going to benefit from it, all right? Make your home into a little church. Sanctify your space. This is especially great for kids, grandkids, whatever. There should be a place in your home which is really dedicated for the worship of God. So you have an icon wall or an icon corner, whatever you set it up. And this is where we pray. But also you can burn incense. I don't know if there's those little like gold or silver metal little incense burners and others. You have, especially here in Melbourne, there's so many Greek stores. You gotta have those. And little things of incense, a little charcoal this big, and you light the charcoal and you put it in the little incense holder. You put one, don't just put a little bit, thing of incense on there, and you can cense your house. Because you don't have to wait for the priest to come and bless your house. You bless your house. You have the royal priesthood. You have the grace of Christ. Bless your house. Sanctify your space. It's a beautiful custom. I don't know how many Greek women still do this, but it used to be, you saw those censers everywhere. All the women did this. And so I grew up with this. My mother would cense the house, usually on Saturday night, sort of get us ready for church the next day. But I know there's no rules. Don't worry about, am I doing it right? Don't worry about that. Just do it. I met somebody who censes the house on Sunday morning before she goes to church. She said that her mother censed the house on Sundays when they didn't go to church. So there's no rule. Cense the house. And because there's something very mystical, very holy, you say the prayers. You light the charcoal and the incense, and by the way, you have to keep the little thing open. If you close it, the fire goes out because there's no oxygen. So you go to your icons of your house. You can create your own system. You say the three Sion prayers, Holy God, Holy Mighty, Holy Mighty. You can start with, O Gladsome Light, sing the hymn, O Gladsome Light. Try to do it at sunset. Say, Lord, I have cried unto thee, hear me. Sing the hymn, if you know it. If you're not, you should know it. Let your prayer arise like incense. Bless all the icons. We have a whole lot of them, but if you only have a few, bless every icon. Ask the saint to intercede for you. Bless the icons and the sign of the cross. Bless every person in the house. Bless every room in the house. You go around the house, saying your prayers and blessing and sanctifying your space. This is very powerful because it reminds us that our home is also a place where we encounter God, and this is where we are sanctified. There's something very powerful in that. And I've started doing this just recently. I'll tell you what happened with Father Costa, because I was raised like this. And for some reason, when I got married, I didn't really follow that. I didn't do this. And I was writing a book, and I was thinking about my mother and how she used to do this, and how what a beautiful peace would descend on the house. The smell of incense was in the air. The whole house smelled like church. And I said, I wonder why I never did. I don't know why. I just never followed that custom. I just never took it up. So I said to myself, I'm not going to say anything to Father Costa. This Saturday, I'm going to cense the house. Okay, so I did. So he loved it. And so the next day, it was Sunday night, and then he said, aren't you going to cense the house? And I said, I thought that was for Saturdays. He said, my mother censed the house every night. I said, okay. I said, do you want me to cense the house every night? He said, yes. So that's our thing now. And he'll remind me, sometimes it gets to be really late, I don't want to stop working on something. Have you censed the house? Go cense the house. So that's my thing. So I go around censing the house. There's a big picture of my son and his fiancée, and I cense them, and I ask God to bless their upcoming wedding. You can say whatever you want. You could say Psalms, you could say the Trisagion prayers, you could make up a prayer for every saint or whatever. Just do it. It's a beautiful custom, and it reminds you that we're living in a Christian home, and so that people come over and say, you know, if somebody uses foul language or something, you say, this is a Christian home. Don't use that foul language in this house. If somebody wants to watch a movie, say, this is a Christian home. We don't watch those kinds of movies in this house. This is a Christian home. We don't have those kinds of books in this house. Sanctify your space. It's a very powerful thing. If you have children, this is a fantastic thing. And it will make such an impression on them for the rest of their lives. So these are the kinds of things that we can do. We make our home into a little church, and we establish a rhythm of life that goes along, because there's a kind of rhythm of there's a calendar year, there's a school year, and then there's a church year. The church is always anticipating a feast, or it's looking back at a feast. So we're always in some season. We're now in the season we're going to be anticipating first of all, the Transfiguration, but also the Dormition of the Virgin Mary. So you're in that season. So you should have, if you don't have, again, this is not a requirement. It's just my suggestion for you to what might really be very nice and useful for you to remind yourself to pray and to do these things. I like to have, I went out and bought all of the festal icons so that we have the icons of all the feasts. And then we have some of other saints and things like this. And we like to have it there where we have our icons and whatnot, so that we remember what season that we're in, and we like to sing the hymn of that feast, whatever it is, Dormition or whatever it is. And so this is something that you can do. Now, you might say, well, I can't afford that. Well, buy a couple at a time. Ask Santa, what do you want for Christmas? A diamond ring, or you could have all icons of all the feasts of the church. I'll take the icons of the feasts of the church, okay? And they can also be in paper, you know. And put them and have a frame that suits that, and just change the paper. You don't have to spend a lot of money. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. There's no right or wrong way to do this, but there's something so special about being reminded that this is what we're doing, because otherwise there's a life at home and then there's a life at the church. But we need to integrate. You have to have one life. It's a life devoted to Christ. And it's amazing how much, especially youngsters, react to this and respond to this. So we need to practice the things the church tells us for spiritual disciplines like fasting. But again, not with anxiety. We should not become anxious about these things. We should not, oh my gosh, I made a mistake and I forgot that it was Friday and I ate a piece of meat, you know, or was it a party, or I didn't know that it was. Come on, just relax. Relax. It's a mistake. If you're not sure whether you should receive communion because you weren't aware or you forgot that, ask your spiritual father. He'll say, receive it, so you receive, or don't receive it, and he wants that maybe to be a discipline for you so that you're more mindful. Whatever it is, you know, just do what he says. But don't become anxious. There's this idea that I have to do it just right, or it doesn't count. We're not like that in Orthodoxy. There's lots of ways to do things. What matters is our intention. What matters is our heart. That goes for chanting too, by the way. What matters is the heart. So learn your Orthodox faith, but just believe and understand you can't explain everything. Have a spiritual father, go to confession. Last, I would say, don't rely on yourself. This is something that all the fathers, the monastics say, don't rely on yourself. Don't decide for yourself what you're going to do. That's a sure way to go down the wrong path and to develop a lot of pride. So what's an example of that? The canons of the church say that during Lent, we're supposed to have bread and water. So I'm going to have bread and water because I was reading the canons. This is what it says to do. My husband had somebody who was doing that. I said to Father, and he told me about it. By the way, the priests don't reveal confessions. They don't, okay? They also don't tell us when people have problems in the church. The only way I ever found out was people assume that Father told me everything, and then they come and tell me. Okay, but they just assumed, but that wasn't the case. So it was one of his spiritual children who was going through Lent on bread and water. I said to Father, how can you let him do that? He says he just insisted, and he just insisted and insisted. So Father said, okay, fine, go ahead. And that's what he was doing. But you're not supposed to decide that for yourself. You might have a brilliant idea. Father, this is what I want to do. And the priest, because he's a priest for a long time, both of them have been priests for a long time, and they have a lot of experience, they can see the pitfalls that you cannot see. So you have to listen to them. You don't decide for yourself what you're going to do, how you're going to fast, whatever. At the same time, let's say there's a general rule for fasting, but you feel like you can't do that. Should you follow the fasting rule, or should you modify it yourself? Talk to your priest. Don't rely on yourself. There's a couple reasons for this. First of all, we lie to ourselves. Secondly, we want the easy way out. Third, we don't learn obedience. And that's one of the most important virtues we can have. So there are times when we have to modify the circumstances, whether it's your prayers or your fasting or whatever. There are times when we just can't keep it. And don't say for yourself, I just can't do it, so I'm not going to do it anymore. Go to the priest and say, Father, I've gotten this little problem. And so he's going to say, that's fine for however long. Or maybe a lot of people will say, well, but I have to take medication in the morning. I have to eat. Then eat. No priest is going to tell you don't eat. Okay? But talk to him and say, Father, this is my situation. So I'll tell you something that happened. I have one child, but I had 2 pregnancies. In the earlier pregnancy, the baby died. In the middle of my pregnancy, it was a very difficult and dangerous, I nearly died from this pregnancy. So when I became pregnant the second time with Christopher, the doctors were very nervous. And he was born in May, so I was very pregnant during Lent. So they wanted me to have meat. So I ate meat during Lent. Everybody kind of understand if a pregnant lady needs to eat meat during Lent, so I did. But we had a visitor. It was a young priest. He was going to be our new assistant priest, and his wife. And they had just come to town, and they had no place to live. So they came to live with us for a couple of weeks while they found some place to live. And here it is, Lent. And after the first night, I didn't want to scandalize them, so I didn't cook them. I didn't have any meat. But at night, after they'd gone to bed, I went outside to the barbecue, opened up the barbecue, and I cooked a couple of lamb chops. Okay. So the next morning, when Father Foti came downstairs, I said, "Good morning, Father Foti. How was your sleep?" He said, "It was great, except I was dreaming about lamb all night." I said, "Oh my God. Oh my God." So then I felt like I had to come clean. I said, "Father, that was me. I didn't want to scandalize you by eating meat during Lent and blah, blah, blah." So this is another reason why we should never judge others. We don't know what's going on. Now, I was very obviously pregnant, but sometimes there's a reason why they can't fast. That's why it's none of our business. Please look into yourself and your own business. You know what? I'm going to stop at this point because I think there's more that I could say, but I'm going to run out of time for your questions. Let me just run through this. Let's be careful what we should avoid. Let us never compromise the faith and the morals of the church. Number 2, I'm giving you 10 things to avoid. Because it's very easy to want to conform so that people will like you. It's not easy when you stand up for something. You don't have to make a crusade out of it. You don't have to proclaim that you're against this or that or the other thing, but you might feel subtle pressure in your job or among your friends to approve of things that you don't approve of. Stick to your guns. Don't conform to the world. Number 2, avoid extremism and legalism and rigidity. And unfortunately, there's a lot of that on the online world. To be Orthodox, you have to be like this. You got to do this. You know, if your priest doesn't wear a cassock everywhere or a long beard, Father's beard is too short, clearly he's not Orthodox. Okay? I don't cover my head in church, clearly I'm not Orthodox. These are the stupid measures that people make to try to assert what they think is true orthodoxy. We're not supposed to do this, okay? Don't be the fasting police. Don't be the ortho police. Don't be the skirt Nazis. Don't be the headscarf, Nazis. Anyhow, I don't think this is a problem in this parish. Orthodoxy is about balance. It's about, you're supposed to be looking at yourself and judging yourself. Avoid false piety and false humility. Sometimes we want to be something we're not. Sometimes people try to act like nuns or monks, and they're not. When you read the writings of the church, the spiritual life of the church is that of the monastic life. What we do is what the monks do, only they do more of it. There's no separate spiritual life for lay people and monastics. They just do more of it all the time. So, when you're reading the ladder of divine ascent, it's not supposed to apply to you unless you're a monk, okay? And even then, you go up the ladder slowly according to your spiritual father. What we do is we read these books and we think that somehow we're supposed to imitate these saints. Oh, Saint so-and-so slept on the floor for 40 years, so I'm not going to sleep in my bed next to my husband or wife. I'm going to sleep on the floor. That's what the saints did. We've had parishioners that did this. I'm telling you this from our experience. They fasted, like my friend, bread and water for 40 days. Of course, that's very difficult to do. You know how lethargic you become when you have a normal life and kids and a job? This is not the right thing to do. So we're supposed to be very careful about trying to be something we're not. If you're not a monk or nun, don't act like one. Just as it would be weird to see a monk smoking or, at the casino or something, because that's not their lifestyle. That's not appropriate for a monk. Your lifestyle is of a person in the world. So be careful before you decide that you should be doing things. That's why you have the priest. Avoid self-righteousness and hypocrisy. Oh boy, we're all guilty of that. Don't act out of a sense of obligation, but trust the church. So we do things, but don't say, oh, I gotta. Just try to do things without a sense of obligation, because Christ does not obligate us. Christ invites us to participate. The church invites us. The church never says, this is Catholic. The Roman Catholic Church has holy days of obligation. You have to go to church on this day or it's a sin, okay? It was so funny because growing up, I never heard of this. And I was in Catholic school. I was 15 years old. They said, if you don't go to church on Sunday, it's a sin. Now, I'm a Greek. So we didn't go to church every Sunday, okay? Nobody ever told us it was a sin. We were never guilted. They never tried to lay guilt on us. You didn't go to church? That's a sin. We don't talk like that in Orthodoxy. I didn't go to church this week. Okay, I'll go next week. Do you understand what I'm saying? Orthodoxy is relaxed. Don't be uptight. Okay? Relax. So the Catholic Church speaks about obligation. You're obligated to follow the decisions of the Holy Father and the Magisterium. You're obligated to go to church on these days. You're obligated to go to... We don't talk like that. You're invited to. You ought to, but it's up to you. That's how it is. So don't minimize things because it's not an obligation. So often people say to the priest, Father, how much do I have to fast? How often do I have to? That's the wrong attitude. We don't do that. So don't make your spiritual life a checklist. Don't be judgmental. That's very easy to do. So easy. The converts judge the cradles judge the converts. The Greeks, they don't really judge it. Well, they judge each other. I was going to say they judge the Russians. The Russians judge the Greeks a lot. This is not what we're supposed to do, okay? Don't judge. You have no idea. First of all, we don't know what's going on in somebody's life. I'll tell you what happened. I was at the supermarket, and this man, I said, there was a long line. And I said to the guy at the checkouts, the checker, I said, could you please call for another checker? There's always somebody around who can open another register. And this guy next to me said, have patience. And I thought to myself, you don't know what's going on with me. Father Costa, before I came here on July 1st, he fell down, he hurt his arm, he can't lift his arm. And it's his right arm, it's bad. So I was standing there holding this ice cream, little tiny drumsticks, but they're really tiny, midget size for him, okay? And he says, you're just getting ice cream. I thought to myself, you don't know my life. You don't know what's going on. I was trying to rush back for Father Costa because He couldn't do a lot of things by himself. And so I thought, but it's so easy for us to fall into that trap. We see somebody and we say, oh, I can't believe they're doing that. I can't believe she's eating that. I can't believe he said that. I can't believe they're dressed like that. These thoughts come to our head. Let's repent of them immediately. Let's say somebody comes to church in shorts. We're not supposed to come to church in shorts. Maybe that was the only time they could come to church. They came to light a candle, say his prayers, they had to go off and do something. So let's not judge them. But it's so easy, but this is how the devil destroys us. Because judgment is the worst thing. Do you know why it's the worst thing? Because when we judge someone, we're saying, I'm better than you. And that's pride, to think yourself better than others, which is the worst sin of all. So when the Lord said, judge not lest ye be judged, that's what he was trying to prevent. Not that we should say, there is no sin, everybody's okay, God loves you all. That's not what he's talking about in judgment. It's those secret thoughts that come to our mind by which we project. Should always assume that there's a reason that this person is doing this, and never assume the worst about them. But usually we judge them according to what we make assumptions about them, which is bad. So don't rely on yourself. We already talked about it. Don't give spiritual advice to others. I'm going to just say this because this is something that's very tempting, especially for those of you who are new to the faith. You're learning things, and people ask you questions, or you hear about something and you say, well, I read Saint so-and-so, or I read in this book, you should do this. Don't do that. Don't go to the internet for advice. Don't ask other people. Don't volunteer advice. There's a couple reasons for that. Sometimes there's a general answer to a question about how we do things or what we should do, but it doesn't always suit that person. The only person who can answer the question is the priest, because he knows their spiritual life and their home situation, their work life. So an answer that might be, we could say, technically correct by the book may not be right for that person. And you might be giving them very bad advice. And by the way, you never want to give spiritual advice, because then you're responsible for the soul of that person. You don't want to be responsible for the soul. The priests have taken upon themselves the responsibility for all the souls of all of you. They will answer to God for your soul. That's a very heavy responsibility. So before you take up the mantle of giving people advice and thinking that you know, you should be very careful about it. They're very reluctant. Just encourage the person to talk to the priest. And lastly, I'm going to say, we're children of the faith. Let's take things as they come. Let's not try to attempt things beyond our abilities. In spite of our enthusiasm for the faith, let's remember what it was like as a child. When you're a kid, you want more. When you're 5, you want to be 10. When you're 10, you want to be 13, a teenager. When you're 13, you want to be 16, right? You want to be able to drive. When you're 16, you want to be 18, so you can move out or be legal. When you're 18, you want to be 21. You're always wanting to be something else. Let's just remember that we can't rush the process, but let's just take things as they come. Let's remember not to rush through things. Let's not try to attempt things that are beyond our abilities, but trust in our church and trust in our clergy that they will guide us. And lastly, St. Paisios said, when we're asking ourselves, how am I to be saved? How can I be sanctified? It's a very simple answer. He said, don't seek to be sanctified, seek to please Christ. We know what that is. We know what would please Christ. If we do that, then we'll always be just fine. Okay, so let's lay it open the floor to questions before I take off.
Thank you again, Presbytera. My question is about the fact that we are constantly told that everything has meaning in the church, and even everything has a deeper meaning, even in the gospel readings. Every paragraph, every chapter is layered, and there's deeper meaning. My question is, with Simon of Cyrene and Jesus not being able to carry his cross and gave him the cross, and we seem to just say that and that's it, and we move on. We don't look into it. Is there another deeper meaning, like Jesus not being able to carry the cross?
Specifically by Jesus not being able to carry?
Like, did he choose to not to carry it to show that it's not his cross to carry, and it's it's humanity's cross?
It's definitely his cross. But you could, look, there's not always a clear answer to this. I think that physically he could not carry it. That's the reason. But if you want to look at it, so this is how when we meditate upon the gospel story, I like what you're asking. I never thought about that. I know that physically he could not carry the cross because he had received a very severe scourging. But I like about the fact that you're thinking about Simon of Cyrene and the fact that Jesus said, if you wish to be my disciple, pick up your cross and follow me. So that's exactly what Simon did. So you can meditate about that. I don't think that he gave it over to Simon.
But Simon reluctantly carried it, like the Romans forced him to carry it.
They forced him to carry it, but because they inscripted him, right? But what a blessing.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, he carried the cross of the Lord. And he was known to the church. Now, he probably became a follower. I'm sure if we looked it up, we'd find out. But St. Mark says, Simon of Cyrene, the father of Alexander and Rufus, was ordered by the soldiers to carry the cross, which means that those young men were known in the church. So he probably was a Christian too. So there's a lot that you can draw out of that. So I like what you're doing. It doesn't mean that that's the meaning that was intended, but you could see that by meditating on that, what does it mean? That we might not expect to have to carry a cross in that way, because that was a surprise to him. He just happened to be in the crowd. That might happen to us, that Christ expects us to do something that we really weren't prepared for, but we have to pick it up and do it, right? There's a lot of things you can get out of that. So whether or not it was intended almost doesn't matter, as long as we can come up with lots of different meanings and meditations that are spiritually useful for us. Okay? Very good.
Hi, thank you so much for your beautiful words. I just wanted to ask, and you use the word intellect, and I've heard that word a lot listening to talks, and often the Orthodox Church is referred to as not an intellectual church. What does that mean as such, and how does that...
Yeah. It depends upon how it's being used, because we do use the word nous a lot, and sometimes that is translated as intellect. So when we say it's not a non-intellectual church, that doesn't mean that we don't use our brains. It just means that we recognize that salvation does not come from comprehending complex theological concepts. People who come from a Calvinist tradition, like Presbyterians, they're all about that. They create in their minds these very elaborate theological constructs and arguments. That's absolutely meaningless for our salvation. So I wouldn't agree that we're not intellectual. I think the fathers are deeply intellectual. But when we speak about the intellect, sometimes we mean the mind in just a basic form. Other times they're talking about the nous, that aspect of the person's mind through which we comprehend God. So there again, it wouldn't be non-intellectual if you mean nous. Do you follow what I'm saying? Yeah. Anybody else? Oh, back there,
yes. Yeah, thanks again. Thanks for spending so much time here, and it's been a real privilege to hear you speak, and also thanks for taking so many questions. And if I can add, your hair looks great, and and that you have.
I gave away my secret. Now you
know.
But it's not vanity; it's just Father Costa. So what can I say?
And I'll add that you have the energy of a young chick. So
thanks.
That's what I'll say. Yeah. You're doing great. And if I can add, I want to ask two questions. One's on behalf of my wife. If you have any personal anecdotes or anything to share on the question of if you live far away from an Orthodox church.
Yeah,
we live over 4 hours away.
Yeah.
The closest one is 3 hours. We live over 4 hours from this church. And they're non-English speaking ones as well.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to...
Yeah, this is a problem in America too. There are a lot of people, especially finding Orthodoxy, and they live hours away from a church. So, if is this what you consider your parish?
I would, yeah.
Yes, this is your parish.
Catechumen through online.
Yes, so you do what you can.
Yeah.
This is all we can do at this point. You do what you can, try to arrange your life as much as possible to be here on Sundays, even though it's a long drive. So you may have to not come every particular Sunday. But I've known people who drove 2 or 3 hours to churches, and that was the closest church, let alone a church that had English, because they lived in remote parts of the United States, in little towns or on a ranch or something.
Yep.
So you do the best you can. And if it's possible for you to live someplace where there's a church nearby, you do that. Or maybe the day will come when you can start an Orthodox church in your area. And a lot of people are doing that too. Maybe that's not for you right now, but it's something to consider in the future. But God will guide you on that. It's very hard. You're still supposed to pray. And of course you have the online now. People are streaming so you can watch. But it doesn't substitute for a real community. It's best if you can live close to the church so that you can be present in as many services as possible. If not, you pray at home as best you can.
Yeah. Well,
There's
thank you
no
for that.
easy answer.
If I may ask my second question, if that's all right. With respect to human reasoning, I know you've stressed this, so I'll give you another opportunity to elucidate. You said that there are times where there's a consensus on certain liturgical matters within the church.
Mm-hmm.
I want to refrain from using the word development or anything, but just for the structure or the appropriateness of the context and the culture and so on.
Of making like certain developments in the church, like liturgical. Yeah, there are liturgical developments.
Yeah.
The priest's vestments didn't always look the way they did. We didn't always have all the same hymns and all the prayers. And so, yeah, that's okay. That's not a betrayal of apostolic tradition.
No,
That's the church recognizing that certain changes have to be made, and they decide by consensus. So that's okay. That's the Holy Spirit working in the life of the church when the church decides something by consensus. Okay, go on.
Yeah, so with the New Testament, obviously we read, Jesus says, when I go, I'll give you the helper. I'll send the helper, and he'll lead you and guide you into all truth. He says that the church is the pillar, or it's also said that the church is the pillar and ground of truth. And then in the book of Acts, we see the Council of Jerusalem. It says, it seemed good to us and the Holy Spirit.
Yep.
And then further on, obviously, you have with 325, First Council of Nicaea. My understanding is that most bishops, or at least the prominent bishops, were on Arius' side. But the conclusion of the council was obviously not favourable to Arius. So it's not consensus, at least in that context, that determines the truth and validity of Orthodox theology. And specifically when it comes to theology and the use of intellect and human reasoning, what is it that actually defines what is and isn't Orthodox theology? Because obviously you also referenced Augustine. He's considered a saint, and yet also some of his theology would say it's not quite accurate. So who is it, or how is it that those delineations are made?
Well, let me just put it this way. All of those issues have been decided. So we have nothing to add. You don't have to worry about it today, because all of those issues have been decided. There's not going to be any new doctrinal issues that come up, that we have to go through that. But definitely you are correct that during the era of the Arian heresy, most of the bishops were persuaded by Arius. But when they gathered together and the explanations were given for why that was not correct, they unanimously voted against him. And they all but 3 voted to condemn him. So clearly the Holy Spirit was working within the fathers of the First Ecumenical Council to change their minds, to be enlightened, to understand the truth. That was a very difficult situation, because here was the problem that was sort of had plagued the church from the beginning. We have always said that God is one. We can never say there's more than one God, right? That's Judaism. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. God is one. There's only one God. And so the first Christians from the beginning would say Jesus is Lord. Have you ever wondered why they said Jesus is Lord? Because the term God was usually used for the Father. So to distinguish Jesus from the Father, they would say Jesus is Lord, but they understood it in a divine sense. So people would say to them, both pagans and Jews, God the Father is God, yes. Jesus is God, yes. Then you have 2 gods. And they said no, but they couldn't explain it. So this was the problem. How is it that we don't have 3 gods? How is it that we have one God, and yet the Son is also God? So there were a lot of different heresies that were proposed to solve that theological problem. And Arius thought he had sort of figured it out by saying that the Son is a created God. He's created by the Father. He was wrong, and there were fathers of the church that championed the true orthodoxy. But in the end, the answer was given by the tradition itself. They didn't have to use human reasoning to figure it out. It was already there. It's in the New Testament. Jesus said, the Father and I are one. What the Father does, I do. That's kind of a thing. So it was already there. It was just a matter of them understanding it. So when it comes to how are we going to know what's orthodoxy today, in terms of doctrine, it's not going to change. We don't have to worry about that. I'm glad we don't have to live through those times. That was very difficult. I don't know if that's what you're asking. Did I adequately answer your question? Yeah, so you mentioned consensus. I understand what you're saying. It's the consensus of the church over a long period of time. There have been cases, like in that 4th century, when most of the bishops were wrong. But it didn't last. By the way, First Ecumenical Council, everybody didn't just jump up and accept it. The Arians had their own council, and they condemned the Orthodox. So there was always this. The question is, what was the staying power? What survived in the end? We believe that the Holy Spirit is guiding the church, and that at the end, that's what's going to happen. This is another reason why you shouldn't become anxious about things that are happening in the church. This bishop is doing that. The ecumenical patriarch is saying this. What's going to happen? Oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Just relax and trust the church. It's in the hands of God. Okay? So some things are going to look like they're going awry. Why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we doing that? Why don't we have more Greek? Or why don't we have more English? Why don't we have this? Why aren't we in union with the Copts? We can see that we are. Listen, it's going to happen if it's the will of God at the right time. We should not have anxiety about these things. We need to trust. The church was in much worse shape many times in the past, but it survived. Okay? What we're supposed to do is pray and remain faithful and not attempt to change the church. That's why this whole thing with women deacons is not going to work, because it's being forced by humans who want their will. If it's the will of God that there be female deacons in the church will come to that realization slowly over a period of time. They will reach a consensus, and it will happen. But we cannot force anything. Okay? Yes, go ahead.
Yep, this question more relates to the content that you gave in the talk before lunch, but we didn't get I didn't get a chance to ask it, so I thought this is my final opportunity.
Yes.
So when it comes to the distinction between the Eastern and Western phronema, would you say that this has significant ramifications, not just within theology departments, but also when we look at these broader cultures, you know, comparing countries that have a Catholic or a Protestant heritage compared to those which have an Orthodox heritage in terms of their political structure and institutional practices and norms?
There is some truth to that, except for this. In a place like Greece, which used to have a Greek phronema, have an Orthodox phronema, that's disappearing. If it's even not, maybe even gone altogether, because having joined the European Union, the Greeks have become like the rest of Europe. And what we used to have is a natural phronema that people had just by living in an Orthodox country, by just by the culture, participating in the daily rhythm of the church, just being Greek, the holidays that you have off because it's a church holiday, the name days, the feast days. There was something about living in Greece that instilled a certain phronema in you. But now that Greece has become so much like Western Europe, that's largely lost. So in terms of Russia, I'm not so sure about that, but I think that there is a certain amount in both of those countries, because let's say the Greek Constitution mentions the Holy Trinity right away at the beginning. Okay, so there's still elements of that phronema they're trying to have, but I don't know enough about politics to say whether or not it's reflected in their political systems. Maybe one more. Go ahead. Khan, you get the last one.
God bless you. And
thank you, dear.
We pray that you can come to Australia again.
God willing.
Presbytera, you may want to answer this question, you may not want to. It's about education. In your country, Presbytera,
yes,
in the last 30 years, there's been a rise of classical education. Orthodox churches in your country, as we speak, are creating Orthodox classical schools. Here in Australia, it's just taking off. So my question is, you mentioned before cultivating virtues, making the home your little church. These schools talk about cultivating virtues. They read the church fathers, they read the Psalms.
Yeah.
Students read the Psalms every day in these classical Orthodox schools.
Yes.
My question is, should we as Orthodox explore this, embrace
I
it,
think-
discuss it?
yeah.
Because in your country it's rising, Presbytera.
Yes, it is, and because when there's no good option, some parishes are creating this, or they're creating a hybrid model where the kids are home a couple days a week, and then they come together at the school on a couple of other days a week. We have to do this because the public schools are just about indoctrinating our children into things that we can't agree with as a culture. So there's a couple of ways to see this. We have to remember this. The great fathers of the church, like Chrysostom and Basil, they all had a pagan education, but they had good, strong Orthodox parents. So they knew what to accept and what to leave behind, what to use and what to reject. So it's not impossible to send a child to a public school, but you kind of have to know your child. It's not impossible for them to remain Orthodox, but it's difficult. Sometimes there is something to be said. We should definitely prepare our kids before they go off to college, before they go to university. We should prepare them for the fact that people will try to destroy their faith, that people will try to entice them to get involved in immoral activities, to get drunk, to sleep around. They will try to do this because they delight in destroying our young people. They love that. The professors love to destroy a person with faith. We have to have our kids be prepared for that and remind them of who they are and what they believe. And hopefully enough has been instilled in them that when they go away to school, that they aren't destroyed or aren't harmed by that. Can we and should we do this? It would be great. The Roman Catholics used to have, every parish had a school. That was so important. And a lot of us Orthodox have sent our kids to Catholic schools. Now that we have, if a parish is able to have a school, they should try to have one, because there's nothing more important than instructing the young. And so this is something which we could do. But then again, it can't remain just at the school. We can't say as parents, they're going to learn this at school. It's the same thing with church school, with Sunday school. It has to be reinforced in the home. You could have an Orthodox school, but if you're not living an Orthodox life at home, if they come home and there's arguing and there's swear words and there's, Playboy, we don't have Playboy magazine anymore, but whatever there is that people have these days, when children respect what they see their parents living, and that's what they follow. You can come in church all you like, but if you're not living like an Orthodox Christian home, you can't instill that in your kids. Because young people recognize hypocrisy and they hate it. Okay? I think this is the end for me. It's 2:15. I've got to be off. Thank you for being such a wonderful group, a wonderful audience. Thank you. Thank you, Athol, and all your work you're doing as the president. Okay.